Hello everyone and welcome back to Halo Sports World once again. I know it's been a while since I've put out a video and in all honesty I just cannot maintain consistency on this channel as much as I would love to due to my work and everything else in between, but the main talking point is that we've got a huge card this weekend in UFC London, and in this video I shall take a deeper look into that card now that we're on the back of a big fight night card, UFC Vegas 50. Another incredible night of fights. I watched the entire thing live and I also thought of doing a review of it earlier in the week. It just wasn't meant to be. But anyway, without any further ado, welcome to the new video and let us get straight into this UFC London breakdown video. So first things first, let me just quickly run down this entire UFC London card here. So the main card starting off with a lightweight showdown between Jai Herbert and Ilia Topuria. Then we have Molly Mccann versus Luana Carolina. Gunnar Nelson finally returning to action against Takashi Sato. Then the big one, Paddy Pimblett versus Rodrigo Vargas. Co-main event between Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker, who's returning to featherweight. And finally the main event between the veteran Alexander Volkov and Tom Aspinall at heavyweight. So, starting off with this first main card fight, Jai Herbert is, of course, the more natural between these two men. He is a former Cage Warriors lightweight champion. Let's not forget about that. I mean, his UFC career didn't exactly start off the way he would have hoped for. Two back-to-back losses against Francisco Trinaldo and Renato Moicano obviously didn't do him a lot of favor there. Moicano absolutely dominated Herbert during their fight. His grappling was ruthless on the night. If you go back and watch that fight, of course, and Herbert mostly had to fight with his back of the cage, and eventually a pretty comprehensive victory for Moicano. But Herbert finally got that big win in his last fight against Kamawardi, got that first round finish, and this is where I believe things could take a turn for him in this upcoming fight against Topuria. Now you see that Topuria is of course a featherweight, currently fighting in the featherweight division. Herbert more of a natural lightweight, like I said. Herbert is 6'1", and I think there could be a big difference of power between him and Topuria. And on top of that, Topuria is taking this fight on short notice. Now I still do believe that Ilia is the favorite to win this fight, but these little things could certainly prove to be a big difference in this showdown. But yeah, nonetheless, a very exciting fight. Topuria, of course, got into that scuffle with Paddy Pimblett earlier this week, and with both men fighting on the main card in the lightweight division, the UFC is definitely going to try and book this fight at some point down the road. If, of course, the two men can live up to the hype. But yeah, for my prediction for this first fight in the main card, I'm going for a victory with for Ilia Topuria, despite the fact that he's taking this fight on short notice, despite the fact that he's more of a natural featherweight. But yeah, I've got him winning, and we shall see if Jai Herbert can pull off a big upset or not. Next up on the main card, we've got Molly Mccann fighting Luana Carolina. Carolina, of course, has just one loss on her UFC record so far, and that one loss was against Ariane Lipsky. She has won all three of her fights via decision, and the most interesting stat here is, of course, she's got a 69 reach, which is a very, very big and impressive number for someone who is fighting in the women's flyweight division. Now, Luana, of course, she's got the range, but Molly has got that clinical boxing, and I think Luana will aim to pick her shots cleanly and possibly cruise her way to another decision victory. But with Molly Mccann, here's the deal. She always brings that energy, and the fact that she's going to fight in front of so many energetic UK fans, that right there might put a lot of pressure on Luana. A victory for Molly here will do wonders for her. I know she hasn't exactly had her way in the UFC lately, but in that last fight against Kim, she looked really precise, and a victory over someone like Luana could be the start of Molly's journey to a potential title shot at some point down the road. Of course, Molly, she's got this great personality, and she definitely was one of the highlights and talking points from that Darren Till versus Derek Brunson card from last year. But yeah, tough one to call this fight, but I'm still backing Molly Mccann to get the job done here, and we shall see how this fight plays out. Yeah, Molly Mccann for the victory. So next up, the big return of Gunnar Nelson, who is set to step back into the octagon for the first time since 2019. That year, Gunnar fought Gilbert Burns and Leon Edwards, believe it or not, and he unfortunately lost both those fights. But if you look at it in this way, in these 3 years, Burns and Edwards have solidified their places as top contenders in the welterweight division. And for some reason, Leon Edwards is not fighting on this card. I think it would have been great to have Leon fight in London, especially when he's on the back of a win over Nate Diaz. I mean, you got people talking about Darren Till's absence from this card, but Leon Edwards is also another big absence from this UFC London card, if you ask me. Nonetheless, the thing that I'm most worried about Gunnar Nelson's return here is, of course, this big layoff and how it will affect him in this bout. Takashi Sato, meanwhile, made his UFC debut in 2019, hasn't fought since November of 2020. So, very interesting parallels right there. I mean, this fight right here is very hard to predict, in my opinion, with Gunnar coming back after such a long layoff. You don't know which version of him we're going to see this weekend. And yeah, Gunnar, of course, he's a very good grappler, and I think his best chance of winning this fight is taking that grappling route. We saw Takashi Sato struggle against Bilal Muhammad in his second UFC fight, and if Gunnar sticks to that similar approach, I think he could cause problems to Sato here. But like I said, the only issue I have here is Gunnar Nelson's big layoff. I have no idea which version of him we're going to see this weekend. If it's the version which fought Santiago Ponzinibbio, then expect Gunnar Nelson to get caught with Sato's striking. Sato's movement is, of course, very good. His striking is on point, and yeah, just because of that layoff factor, I will have to go with a victory for Takashi Sato right here. I think Gunnar Nelson is going to get caught with one of those shots from Sato, and he probably rushes in looking for the TKO finish. But yeah, we shall see what happens. I'm looking forward to seeing Gunnar Nelson's return as much as you are. All right, so next up we have the big one. Paddy Pimblett returns for his second UFC fight against Rodrigo Vargas. Paddy, of course, got off to a great start in the UFC, beating Luigi Vedramini in his debut in spectacular fashion. He let his hands and his striking do all the talking, despite the fact that Paddy left his chin exposed a little bit, and I think he almost paid the price for it. He could have easily gotten finished by Luigi, but like I said, he maintained his composure, got the job done in spectacular fashion in the end. Now, this fight against Rodrigo Vargas, I feel is going to be something very, very similar to what we saw in that first fight. Paddy is definitely going to push the pace in this fight. He's not going to sit back and and look for an opening. And I think if Vargas decides to sit back, he could get into big trouble with Paddy pushing him with his striking. We can expect him to push the pace, and there are high chances of Paddy pulling off something spectacular here because of the fact that he's fighting in London and it's also only his second ever UFC fight. Obviously, he wants to do something. He wants to be the standout performer on this card, and there are high chances that he will be the standout performer from this UFC London card. Now, of course, there is this big difference in competition here. Obviously, the UFC is still trying to build up Paddy by giving him fights as such, but the concern for me here is that from what I saw in Paddy's first fight, he tends to get hit, and when he eventually gets a step up in competition, will Paddy the Baddy be able to sustain the pressure against high level strikers? Will he be able to take those shots from fighters who are very clinical in terms of his striking in his division? um, in terms of striking in his division. So yeah, this is obviously something that might be an issue that the UFC will face in regards to Paddy when he finally gets that step up in competition. For the last few years, we've said the same thing for Sean O'Malley in the bantamweight division. He's someone who I feel fits this category perfectly. So yeah, we shall see what happens when Paddy eventually, fights someone who is higher ranked in his division. But yeah, for now, my final thoughts. I'm completely expecting Paddy to try and showcase another striking display here. I'm expecting him to get a finish. I think he'll swing for the fences, and we shall see if things work out for him in that manner. I'm expecting a huge ovation for this man when he walks out. So yeah, let's see how Paddy the Baddy does in his second UFC fight. All right, so next up we have the co-main event. Arnold Allen on an 8-fight win streak going up against Dan Hooker, who is set to make his return to featherweight. Obviously, the big talking point here is Hooker making that cut to 145 once again, but I do expect him to make weight, of course. Hooker did a practice weight cut a while ago, so yeah, I think it's fair to rely on him to make weight here. But I do believe the odds are stacked against Hooker in this fight. I mean, Dan Hooker already has had a very tough time in the UFC lately. He went 1-2 last year with that devastating loss to newcomer Michael Chandler. I mean, that loss right there probably was a very hard pill to swallow for Dan. He came back and looked really good on the ground against Nasrat Haqparast in the following fight, something that we didn't really see from Hooker in the past. Then, of course, he took that short notice fight against Islam Makhachev and ended up paying the price for it with that quick submission loss. So, yeah, Arnold Allen is obviously defending his 8 fight win streak, like I said. And considering the fact that he could be just one win away from a title shot with a win here, tells me that Allen is going to go out there and put together the best performance of his UFC career so far in what arguably is the biggest fight of his UFC career so far. I don't think we're going to see Allen trying to go in for that KO. I feel he will rather play it more safe. I think he's going to fight in a very disciplined manner, like he we saw against Makwan Amirkhani. And I just think that Allen will look to keep tagging Dan Hooker for 3 rounds. Of course, his boxing is very clean. His kicks, as we know, are very devastating, and I think we'll see a lot of those in this fight against Dan. I know Hooker is known for his striking as well, but I just don't think that Allen will let Dan Hooker charge in and push and let him push this fight with his striking. He's probably going to maintain up that particular range and look to gradually pick his shots to get that decision win. But yeah, I certainly don't expect this fight to be boring by any means, despite the fact that Arnold Allen hasn't got a TKO finish on his UFC record so far. Um, do not look past this man and his fights. They are highly entertaining, and I feel we're about to witness another striking masterclass from Allen this weekend. I will give him an outside chance to pull off a submission victory here, but for my final predictions, I do believe that Arnold Allen gets the job done via decision over Dan Hooker in this fight. So, yeah, we shall see how this one plays out in the co main event of UFC London. Okay, so finally, getting down to the big one, the main event of UFC London, featuring the up-and-coming heavyweight sensation in the form of Tom Aspinall, who is set to face one of the veterans of the UFC's heavyweight division, Alexander Volkov. Volkov, on the back of a successful 2021, I would say, his last fight was a victory over Marcin Tybura, whom he beat at UFC 267. He lost to Cyril Khan and in the fight before, but did secure a win over Alistair Overeem before his loss to Khan. So yeah, big difference in experience between the two men. Volkov has faced some absolute killers in the heavyweight division throughout the years. He's stepped into the octagon with the likes of Walt Harris, Fabricio Verdum, and Derek Lewis in the past. And Tom Aspinall's biggest victory, on the other hand, I would say, is over Andrei Arlovsky, whom he beat before his last win over Sergey Spivak. Aspinall is obviously very agile. His movement and his body language is very, very smooth. It almost reminds me somewhat of Cyril Khan's movements whenever he is fighting. And it is not the typical heavyweight style of movement that we're used to seeing in whenever the likes of Derek Lewis or maybe Francis Ngannou is fighting. Aspinall, of course, he has solid takedown defense, I believe. We saw a glimpse of it in that fight against Spivak, even though Spivak didn't really threaten him that much. And Aspinall's fast hands and striking caught Spivak off guard, and he got the job done instantly via a TKO. In this case, though, I do think it's going to be a lot different. Alexander Volkov has a slight height advantage, and he could cause Aspinall real problems with his striking here. Volkov could use his long range and his long hands to attack Aspinall from time to time, which I think could cause him a bit of problem. So we should see how Aspinall deals with someone who has such great reach. Um, as for Volkov, though, he obviously has a lot more experience in terms of fighting in UFC main events. He has previously fought full 25 minutes when required of him, so he could push this fight to the distance and take Aspinall to the deep waters. Then we shall see how Aspinall does when he gets into those latter rounds. That is round number 4 and round number 5. Obviously, there will be a lot of pressure on Aspinall's shoulders here, fighting in London against a veteran like Volkov, even after stating that he wants to take things slowly in the heavyweight division. So the fans will certainly be hyped, certainly expect Aspinall to deliver. And I can only imagine the scenes if a Russian fighter beats the crowd favorite in the UK under such circumstances. But yeah, tough one to call this fight. I'm not entirely sure who gets the nod here. I think Volkov has a solid chance of getting his hand raised via decision if he decides to push this fight into the championship rounds. As for Aspinall, I feel he has the tools to knock out Volkov, almost in similar fashion to how Derek Lewis got Volkov in their fight. I'm not saying it necessarily has to be a last second knockout, but could be a KO of similar fashion, is what I'm saying. Yeah, UFC London obviously shaping out to be a great card, has shaped out to be a great card. Very exciting card. The prelims is also a must watch with Paul Craig, Jack Shore, and all these guys fighting in the prelims as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this event this weekend, and looking forward to all the main card fights that I just broke down. And yeah, that's it for this video. That's it for this breakdown of UFC London. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.